All right. So if we're all ready,
Yeah, go for it.
let's get started. Step right up and get your certified victim status here. See if victimhood is the right fit for you. Don't fall behind your peers. The more you've been harmed, the more you matter. Make your voice heard over those with privilege, and don't miss out on all the opportunities you'll have to get offended. Everybody loves a good victim. Side effects may include self-pity, prolonged victimization, misery with or without company, a false sense of entitlement, and declining politician interest after election day. All satire aside, victimhood is no joke. But why is victimhood in such high demand, and why are so many young people seeking it? You've noticed that a lot of people are reliving grievances of the past, but are also having a dissatisfaction with the present. In our society, we don't face the same issues our ancestors did. And now we live in the most advanced society in history. So why does it seem like we have so many problems? Today, I'd like to investigate the prevalent issue of victimhood. First, we'll look at what victimhood is, then how the victim mindset is created, and finally, how to break out of the bondage of victimhood. Unless otherwise noted, all graphics are either created by me or can be found on Google Images. We all know bad things happen. Victimization can stem from circumstances beyond our control, like wars, crime, abuse, and poverty. In the famous diagram of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological needs form a survival base to support the next level of safety needs. Then we find love and belonging, then we seek esteem, and finally we search for self-actualization. If any of the lower level needs go unmet, the upper level needs are virtually impossible to attain. So any deficit of basic needs can lead us to feel victimized. Sometimes victimization can stem from shattered families, social isolation, low self-esteem, or failure to achieve and meet goals. And while our problems may be in the physical world, their impact is on the mental world. So whether our problems stem from external struggles or internal hardships, around the world we have a pandemic of people who feel like victims. What may start as an incident of victimization could stem into a victim mentality, which if left unchecked could lead to a lifestyle of victimhood. So what exactly is a victim mentality? Well, in an article, The Victim Mentality, Dr. Sherry Jacobson notes that, quote, if you have a victim mentality, you will see your entire life through a perspective that things constantly happen to you. A victim mentality is to avoid taking responsibility for yourself or your life, unquote. So a victim mentality is actually chosen by avoiding responsibility. Another article about how the victim mentality is created by Psychology goes further into this. Quote, the victim mentality is a learned behavior, which means that it does not have at its base any biological or genetic workings. It is something that the person has brought on due to constant churning and spinning of negative thoughts, unquote. That's actually good news. A victim mentality is not programmed into us, which means it is something that we can change. A victim mentality is something that we learn by repetition. By constantly rehearsing an incident of victimization, then focusing on the negative by believing the lies that we tell ourselves and others reinforce, we can even take on the hurts of past generations. But we do not inherit a victim mentality. It is something that has been trained into us, and it can be trained out of us. A man who bravely modeled how to avoid the victim mentality is Archie Williams. He performed on America's Got Talent in 2020. Before that, he had been wrongfully convicted for a crime that he did not commit, and he was incarcerated for 37 years. No one could blame him for slipping into the victimhood mentality. But when asked how he endured the long decades of prison, he replied, quote, freedom is of the mind. I may have gone to prison, but I never let my mind go to prison, unquote. Archie Williams learned exactly how to avoid victimhood. He stopped it from sprouting in his mind. The battle for the mind is where the war is won. When an incident of victimization occurs, it can feel like a bomb has landed in our hands. But it is up to us what we do with that bomb. Do we hold it in our hands, let it blow up in our lives, or do we find a way to jump into action and cast it aside so it cannot harm us? If we take a closer look at the word victim, we can see that it ends in I-M. I. Focusing on the I'm is actually the source of our problem. The I'm offended, I'm hurt, I'm you fill in the blank. we need to get ourselves away from this self-focus and cast aside this self-inflicted abuse. How do we do this? We seek to become victors, but this doesn't happen without work. In order to become a victor, we need to embrace the OR, our response, because it is not what happens to you, but how you respond, which separates the victims from the victors. While we cannot control being a victim for a moment, we can change our response to avoid a lifestyle of victimhood. So it all comes down to our choice. We can either choose to become a victim or become a victor, all based on our response. When the incident of victimization happens, rather than reliving the pain that made you a victim, open up to recovery by deciding you will heal. Instead of believing the lies that you and others tell yourself, operate in renewal and clear your mind. Instead of avoiding responsibility, overcome that by taking on responsibility for your actions in life. Instead of projecting the blame on others, optimize your chances for reconciliation. And instead of opening up to the destructive victimhood mindset, move into the overwhelming redemption that comes by being free of it. Now, the lower pyramid of the victim is a small slope culminating in victimhood, which is a sturdy position, but not easy to escape. Whereas the inverted angle of the victor may seem a little unstable at first, in order to break free from victimhood and into the overwhelming redemption, we need to humbly accept the support of God and people if we are to experience that redemption. If our choice is to open up to recovery and move ever higher through the processes of healing, we will experience that redemption. Such is the life of Nick Vujicic. Born without limbs, he had all the reasons in the world to be a victim. He lived a surprisingly happy childhood, and even at school, he wasn't particularly bullied. It wasn't until he was a preteen that he began to realize that he would never live a normal life, getting married or getting a job. He felt that he would be a burden to his family and began to feel depressed, anxious, and lonely. He attempted suicide multiple times. But then one day, his high school janitor, who just happened to lead an after-school Bible study, asked Nick if he would share his story at their next meeting. Nick finally agreed, and when he was speaking, he felt a deep sense of purpose and belonging and began to see God's vision for his life. Now he is a world-famous evangelist, happily married with 4 children. He travels the world preaching the gospel and lives a life of positivity with redemption and this recovery. He gave up his victim status in order to become a victor in Christ. When the incident of victimization happens, instead of taking on the pain, lies, irresponsibility, and blame that ultimately become victimhood, instead take on the recovery, renewal, responsibility, reconciliation, and redemption that comes to a victor. One of the iconic scenes in the Lord of the Rings movies, based on the books by J.R.R. Tolkien, is in the Fellowship of the Ring. As they are traveling through the dark underground mines, the evil ring of power, which seeks to corrupt and enslave the world, has fallen into the hands of a small hobbit, Frodo. This ring seeks to destroy those who carry it, very much how victimization can take over our lives. The only way to be rid of this burden and save the world is to travel into the land of shadow and cast it into the fire where it was made. In a brief moment of despair over his burden, Frodo cries out to Gandalf, quote, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish that none of this had happened." Gandalf replied, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. The only thing we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." Unquote. So what will you do with the time given to you? Throughout our lives, we will experience plenty of opportunities to take on hurt and victimization. And while being a victim for a moment is unavoidable, being a victim for a lifetime, that's a choice. So choose wisely. Remember that we are not victims by nature. So don't be afraid to throw away the bomb. Don't get comfortable with victimhood. Don't be a victim. Be a victor.